I'm Charlotte Tenhoenstein, and you're watching Breakthrough News on BTR Today. Today, we're talking about the fascinating enterprise of making music with whales and other animals. I'm joined by David Rothenberg. David, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for inviting me, Charlotte.
Thanks for coming on. David is a professor is a musician and a philosopher, and a professor in both these subjects at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. David, you've published several books on your work and also released several CDs on the results of jamming with these various species, ranging from birds to whales to even insects now.
That's right.
So it's absolutely mind-boggling to me. So I'm super excited about this conversation. So the big questions are: is it possible for animals to have real creative, artistic impulses? And if so, can we collaborate with them? So I guess just to start off, you obviously think that the answer to both these questions is yes, and you've been experiencing it firsthand for several years now.
That's right. And it's not an idea that originates with me. It's an idea that goes back through all of human history. People have been obsessed with animals and their beauty and their creativity and their life and their spirit. And some would say in the modern world we might be a little distanced from that. But if you look back to the theory of evolution and what Charles Darwin actually wrote about, he said that he recognized that animals were doing all kinds of creative things. He said birds have a natural aesthetic sense. That's why they have such beautiful feathers and sing such beautiful songs.
So let's talk a bit at first just about your general approach to music, which surely goes beyond, the idea of composing songs. I mean, improvisation seems to be a big part of it, right? And even the sense that you can hear music in all these different manifestations in the wild.
Yeah, I think that I would consider myself a jazz musician,
Mm-hmm.
even though one who doesn't often play from the standard jazz repertoire. I came up studying improvisation and being very interested in how jazz was a kind of music that seemed to be open to many kinds of music from throughout the world, music from India and Japan, as well as the whole Western tradition. But through improvisation, you can learn to connect to music in a very unfamiliar situation. You could sit down with someone you might be unable to speak with, who doesn't speak English or a language that I can speak, but I can make music together with them.
Or isn't even a human.
That's the next step. The first step is you can do it with humans, but then why not try with other species? Why should we assume we're the only ones who are musical? Because a lot of the sounds animals make are much closer to music than they are to language.
And there's this sense of, which I think you've talked about it before, of this idea that music actually might be a much better way to communicate with animals than language, full stop.
I'd say
Right.
in one sense it's really easier because look at how people communicate with music. Music is so important for us, but we don't quite know why. What is it actually doing? What does it actually say? What's the real meaning of a piece of music that doesn't have words to tell us what it means? We know it's very emotional. We know it's important to us, but you can't exactly describe what it means. And so when you can communicate with music without entirely understanding what's happening. So that's one reason you can do it with animals who are making music and you have some interaction. You don't quite know what is happening, but something about it seems real and present, and a connection can be there, and you don't quite know what it is.
So this idea of not, yeah, as you said, you don't even have to know exactly what you're communicating to form a connection
In a
with
way, you
someone.
can't. We don't quite know what music means, but we know it's important and that it goes beyond our certainty. So it's a wonderful way to communicate in these uncertain situations when you're together with animals with whom you cannot speak. Music can be somehow made together. Often it doesn't work, but sometimes it does.
Well, what I find
Sometimes it
funny is
does.
there was a quote in one of your articles about how how often it's a very lonely process. So most of the time you don't get anything back from the animal or the whale, which we'll get to in a second. But then when you do, it's particularly thrilling. But then you said, as with improvising with humans, which I thought was
That's right. Often you're with, if you
surprising.
look at scientists have very carefully studied nightingales, for example, particularly in Berlin, in Germany, where I spent last year on sabbatical. There's a lot of scientists studying nightingales, and they've figured out how they communicate with each other. And the males are singing, and they sing at night, and also during the day, but especially at night. And when they're competing with each other, they sort of try and interrupt each other. One will start singing, another will immediately interrupt and say, no, I'm singing here. I'm getting in the way of your statement. once they've acknowledged they have
It's a sing off.
right, once they've acknowledged they have separate territories, one's going to sing, then they'll stop, and the next one will sing. They leave space for each other, keep singing. That's a sort of sign of friendliness. And then those at the top of the heap, the most dominant males, just ignore everyone else. Maybe they listen, maybe they don't. It just doesn't matter.
Wow.
And I think any jazz musician would say, if you're playing with human jazz musicians, these three types are quite common to same thing is going on.
Which you see firsthand.
Yeah,
as
I
well.
think any musician would say they've met people of these three different types.
Wow.
Oh, were you playing then? You know, I didn't notice. Were you even in the room?
God, wow. That sounds quite scary, actually. But
Don't
but
you
so,
know people like that?
I guess I'm not. Yeah, let's not dwell on that. But so what's so special about whales?
Well, the interesting thing about humpback whales in particular is they have this incredibly long, involved, and complex song that no humans knew anything about until the 1960s. We just didn't know.
Other whales, we did have a few, right? I mean, like beluga whales, there are writings.
That's right. Beluga
from
whales
the
sing
16th
above
century.
the water, and they're similar to dolphins. They make sounds we can hear, and they come up and engage. And they also use sound a lot more like language, interacting with each other. But this humpback whale thing is really a song, a long performed song. And when this was discovered kind of inadvertently by the US Navy, who was listening underwater, they couldn't believe this was happening. They thought it was secret codes from Russian submarines or something.
Those Russians.
They wanted to believe they were reaching some secret codes, but the whales were making these long songs, and it was just an astonishing discovery. And once the general public found out about it, because this was pretty soon declassified, because it was a more general than, you know,
once they realized that the whales were not a threat to national security.
That's right. They said everyone should hear this. It's so beautiful. And it's the discovery of this song, that really got people interested in saving whales. Until that moment, whales were sort of off the radar of conservationists.
And this was in 1970 when they came out with this record, and as you say, almost single-handedly started this save the whales movement. So you go out on a boat and you play clarinet into an underwater speaker, and then you have headphones that are linked to an underwater microphone, so you can. That's right.
It's like I'm down there. I'm making music in their environment. I'm listening to it. And I try to do this often, but it's difficult to set up. There's so many obstacles. And then you
not least because it's actually illegal.
That's right. It's a form of marine mammal harassment. You shouldn't harass marine mammals. We don't know what might upset them. So back off. Don't.
Well, I'm sure your playing's fine, but like maybe other less skilled musicians. That might really be harassment.
The law treats all music equally as something you shouldn't do, and the idea is to protect these animals. I can't dispute the intent of that law. I would say if I had the sense that the
I'll just dispute the law.
if I got the sense the animals were getting upset, I would stop.
Well, presumably they would just either overturn your boat or
they might
swim away.
But those that believe in the precautionary approach would say that you don't know what it's doing. Maybe over time it upsets their song, changes the way they communicate. We don't know, so maybe better not to mess with what we don't know. So that's the argument behind this law.
Well, that goes against a lot of science.
Well, scientists, if you read the scientific permits, they're allowed to do anything with these whales. They get special permission to investigate them, and they're supposed to police themselves. But, I think most whale scientists are rather responsible. What the less responsible humans are the ones that are making a lot of noise underwater, like huge amounts of boats, very loud propellers and other sounds, and plus the testing of sonar by some branches of the Navy that is making just too much noise, and that's definitely damaging many species of whales, although not so much humpbacks. I have to say that there's also many people working for the Navy studying the communication of whales. It's probably the agency that spends the most research money and time on trying to figure out what the whales are doing is the Navy. So they're not just trying to upset whales in the name of national security. They'd really like to understand them.
Well, we're going to take a break in a second, but before we do, I just want to ask, so how do you know when the whales are actually responding to you as opposed to just making sounds and you're kind of tagging along?
Honestly, you don't. I mean, basically you can't tell, but when it seems like they are is if you start to notice the kinds of sounds they're making. If you hear, when I played a clarinet tone, which tends to be more of a single pitch, like ooh, and the whales are usually going ooh, ooh.
That's quite good.
But then when you hear a whale try and play a steady note, they try and go ooh.
Oh, so
You
you
hear
can
them
tell
like
that they're like
he's really
trying to
doing something
imitate.
different.
So it's sort of a game of like imitation
Maybe, but
almost.
I wouldn't say they're necessarily imitating as much as joining in and finding a way to connect their musical world, whatever these sounds mean to them. They're testing out this new idea because one unusual thing about humpback whales is they're always changing their song. Most
Mm,
animals don't do that. They have a set song. That's what they've learned to do. That's what they use. But these whales change their song. And strangely enough, they all change it together. When one start singing a new song, the others all pick up the new song very rapidly over a matter of days and weeks and months. They'll pick up the new song.
mm.
And this changes, you can really sense the change if you go back 1 month and then go back the next. They're all singing something a little bit different. We don't know why they need to do that because that kind of mass change of one song to another is very rare in the animal world.
Wow. I just imagine that there's a tension between, and I feel like this is often probably the way with most sort of extraordinary discoveries where on the one hand you think, oh my God, I'm witnessing the most incredible thing ever, like this insight into this profound mystery. And then on the other hand, like, is it just in my head and am I literally crazy?
I
How do
mean,
you
I
deal with
don't know
that
what
tension?
it means,
But you
I
feel
know
it
that
to be true.
sometimes I feel that sometimes interesting music, at least interesting to me, is
Mm,
made together with the whale sound and what I'm doing live.
mm,
Some interesting thing happens that I like, and then I'll
yeah.
put that aside and say, okay, here it is. What do
Okay.
you think? And a lot of people don't like it. Other people say, well, this is really interesting. And it's somewhat different from what is expected. I mean, there are a lot of examples of human music combined with whales, and often people are playing some kind of soft, repetitive, meditative thing, and the whale sound is added and it sounds good. And I myself have made music like that in the studio with whale songs, and there you have complete control. You can do anything. But in the live situation, excites me more because you really just don't know what is going to happen.
But the idea that the whale, how necessary is it in your uh in this whole enterprise? How necessary is it to believe that the whale is deliberately interacting with you as opposed to you're just inspired by it, you're inspired by the situation, and you're getting this incredible music out of it?
It's more interesting because it makes it more of
Mm.
a two-way street. It's like if the
Mm-hmm.
whale is actually interested in what I'm doing, that's kind of cool. If you could hear that, if you
Yeah.
and some the best examples, it's that can be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Many people hear it and they sense what's happening, and that's
Yeah.
quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Compared to, I hear an interesting sound, I can do something. I mean, if anyone out there is planning to do this, the one advice I give is just leave a lot of space. Don't
Mm-hmm.
play all the time. Play a little bit, listen, think about what you're hearing, and then maybe change what you would do in the moment in relation to what you're hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So when people ask me, well, like why don't you play like country or
Yeah.
EDM? Why don't you play EDM for the whales, like some real
Lost some of
electronic stuff? I
that.
says I don't know what I'm playing as much as some kind of sound I think might interact with what they're doing.
Mm.
So the main thing is to leave space for whatever else is out there. But I would encourage people, who want to break the letter of the law a little bit. If you want to do this, don't do it all the time. Do it with
There
a
are
lot of
worse ways to
respect.
break the law.
That's right. Do it with a little respect and leave space and listen.
Okay. Well, I will say that Breakthrough Radio is not advocating breaking the law on this show.
Nothing
But
called breakthrough would advocate something like that.
right, of course. Well, we are going to take a break. We'll be right back in a moment after this quick excerpt from the latest episode of Live Studio featuring Future of What? Music break, music break, music break. What I'm going to do right now